Hi, and welcome to the Founders Journey podcast, episode number 4. I think now we're blazing through the early stages here. I'm your host, Greg Moran, with my co-host Peter Dean. The podcast is all about being able to provide actionable insight and personal experiences from founders who are out there making it happen. And we have a guest today who is probably definitely the best example of the 4 episodes that we've had yet. So Chuck, you are definitely at the top of the list in terms of experience in this on the founder's journey here for our podcast. So I'm going to let Peter introduce our guest today, Chuck Stormon.
First of all, I want to tell you guys that we increased 400% in our followers or listeners. We have 4 more people, right? We got
to our benefit, just so people understand, we actually hadn't even started to promote the show yet. So
no, but we have I think my mom is still listening, so I think we're good. And then maybe my wife hasn't listened, but Chuck knows her, and she likes it better than me, so it should be like, oh, yeah, Chuck, I'm going to listen. So anyhow, I've known Chuck for a long time. He's a really good friend. He's actually been a really good mentor for me. So I'm so excited to have him on. And I went through and I tried to list everything I knew about him, and it's not even all in one paper. But I'm just going to go through and touch on some of these just so you kind of learn about why I was so excited to have him on. Coherent, right? You had 2 coherents, both exits. That was your first company, right? Coherent.
Yep.
And then,
by the way, it is great to be here. Thank you guys for having me on.
Awesome.
Thanks for joining us, Chuck.
So, Coherent Research sold that, started Coherent Networks, had an exit there. Stellius, right? That was next. What was the next one?
After Stellius, the acquiring company was a public company called Techelec, and I worked for them for 3 years.
Right.
And then after that, I left at a time of my own choosing and hung out a consulting shingle for about 6 months, and then joined Packet Exchange.
Right. And then you had a 10. So wait, let's go back. So Stellius, is that the one that got acquired after you left? Is that
right? Techelec. I left Techelec after 3 years, and after I left, it was taken private by a private equity firm.
Right.
And then subsequently acquired by Oracle.
Amazing. And then Packet Exchange Attend, right, was after that.
Yep.
Am I right?
Yeah.
But
although
what I took out,
we'll call it Rush Terra, was after Packet Exchange.
Oh, right, Rush Terra. Okay, Rush Terra. Yeah, that was awesome. But what I skipped was faculty at Lemoyne, probably not in that order, right? And faculty at Syracuse University. And I'm sure there's a whole bunch like Seed Capital in New York.
Yep.
So, and I believe Seed Capital is what invested in one of Greg's. Was that Seed Capital?
That's right. That's right. Greg.
Yeah.
I met Greg.
Of yours. So
I met Greg when we invested in Greg's company. So
that was when we were both 13 years younger.
Yes. Yeah. It's a journey.
So, that's right.
And then
that's right.
Layered in there is this like really small, simple little project you had called Startfast.
Yeah, talk about that, Chuck, and give us.
Yeah, Startfast is the last decade and the next decade of my life.
Yeah, Startfast.
Yeah, give us the.
Tell them how it started out. And I was joking because I went out and mentored at Startfast as its first iteration, and it was like amazing. These people and I don't think you slept during the summer when you did that. I mean, it was amazing.
Sleep is
overrated. Why don't you talk about
that? Yeah, give us a history of Startfast, Chuck.
Sure. Startfast Ventures is the name of the venture fund that I'm a general partner in. And Startfast Fund 1 was a classic startup accelerator modeled after Techstars. We actually had Brad Feld as a mentor And we took all the Techstars operating documents and basically just modified them. And my partners in that are Nasser Ali and Martin Babinek. The three of us got together and said, how can we do a Techstars in upstate New York? We answered that question as a process of learning what kind of company and what kind of founders should we back. It's all pattern matching. We were looking for people that we thought would be successful with an idea that we thought could get traction. But I think of Startfast Fund One as the most intensive learning experience in my life. I mean, I've got a master's, I've had a bachelor's degree, I dropped out of a PhD program. Those are nothing in comparison to what I learned over the 8 years of investing in Startfast Fund One. And, we helped 48 companies get from point A to point B. We usually ran into them before they were ready for seed funding, and ended up, with some of them taking them to private equity and to, massive success. In the case of SpinCar, which is now Impel, that was our number one investment from Startfast Fund One.
Yeah, I remember that.
Chuck, you say, that was the biggest sort of learning experience of your career. What stands out? What were kind of the biggest lessons that you took away from that?
I came to this with a passion because by 2007, when I made my first investment as a venture capitalist, as an LP in the seed capital fund, I had decided that I'd had so much success over my entrepreneurial career and made so much money with those exits that I really had to redefine what I'm here on the planet to do. Why am I? And what I came up with was, well, I can help other entrepreneurs. So it's a very pay it forward, high-minded mission. Why help entrepreneurs? Well, because they, in my opinion, are the people that change the world in the most meaningful and operational way. That when you put an entrepreneur on a problem, you're going to get a solution that is scalable and sustainable more often than when you put an academic on a problem, or a government person on a problem, or a big business on a problem. And also entrepreneurship, starting a business is so hard that nobody does it just to make money. If anybody's in it just to make money, they quit very quickly. So that's absolutely the other reason that entrepreneurs can be counted on, not just to create creative, sustainable, and scalable solutions, but they're also going to do it with totality. They're going to put 100%, 110%, or 150% of their being into that solution. Yeah. Because anybody that doesn't have a passion for it quits. It's just too hard.
Yeah.
And that's how I defined myself in 2007. What I learned over the intervening decade and a half is that's a great high-minded goal, but there's a lot of really pragmatic things that I had to learn. I had to become a savvy investor, 100 lessons about why to say no, even if all the passion is there. Yeah. And the team is great and the technology works. I still have to say no 99% of the time to investing in a deal. And so just those really hardcore lessons that I've learned through experience, I think I don't think there's any other way to learn those lessons deeply than by, making mistakes and
there was something else I think really interesting about Startfast when you guys initially started it, which was, Martin Babinek is one of my closest friends, has been a mentor for me for a couple of decades, and Nasser is a great friend, and knowing all three of you guys, there was another passion there that I think really stood out, and that was your really deep desire to drive investment capital in upstate New York, right? A secondary market. I mean, what and I know from Startfast Ventures, where you guys are, focused today, that's still that secondary market investing is still a real passion. Where does that come from? And what is it that what's the importance of that to you guys? Because look, it's easy to go out. Well, I shouldn't say it's easy, but anybody can go out and invest in Midtown Manhattan. Anybody can go out, or anywhere in Manhattan or Silicon Valley. You're not doing that.
Yeah, and we're certainly not limited to upstate New York. We live in upstate New York, and that's probably why we know what we know. But we invest all over the United States, but not in Silicon Valley so much, and not in Manhattan so much. So I'm glad you asked this, because this is really core to what Startfast Ventures and Startfast Fund 2 is really about. And that is, there are great entrepreneurs everywhere. And I know this because I consider myself a great entrepreneur. And I was sitting in Syracuse, New York. And when I went out to raise capital, it was hard. My first round of capital in my first company, I was going out to raise $1 million. I held 158 in-person presentations, and I raised 150,000 of the million. So that raise was a fail. Eventually, I raised money. Where did I get it from? Silicon Valley, New York City.
Right.
Also from St. Paul Venture Capital in St. Paul, Minnesota. But that was sort of the exception that proved the rule, that great entrepreneurs are everywhere, but capital is not spread evenly across the United States. It's very lumpy. There's a huge chunk of capital in Silicon Valley and the nearby surroundings, and a huge chunk of capital that goes into Manhattan. And then there's 10 other metros that have the rest. Yeah. And everywhere else on the map, including upstate New York and places like Phoenix, Arizona, or Sarasota, Florida, and anywhere in the middle of the country, is white space. It gets effectively zero venture capital. So why do I care? Well, the original caring came from, hey, I live in one of these white spaces, and I want these entrepreneurs to be supported. I don't want them to have to move their company to Manhattan or Silicon Valley. I didn't want to move. I got offered lots of venture capital if I would just move my company to Silicon Valley multiple times. And I said, no, I like it here. I like the lifestyle here. I like the culture and the community here. So why can't we create the American dream in place? Why do we have to move our companies to one of these hubs? So that was the original motivation. But now I know there's another good reason. If you invest in the white space, investor. And the reason is that if you're trying to hire a core engineering team in Silicon Valley, you not only pay top dollar and top options, but every 10 months you have to hire another team, because your team hops around, because they have so many, if the going gets tough, your engineers get going. They go get their stock options from somebody else. It's incredibly expensive. It's not just the cost of real estate. It's not just the time wasted in commuting. It is the cost of growing a business. Whereas in any of the places we invest, when you hire somebody, they're with you for the duration. They're not going to hop to another job. And we've figured out it saves you at least 30% of capital that's not wasted when you invested in a company in these outside of these venture capital hubs.
Do you see that changing?
We also get a better price going in too.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you see that changing now, Chuck, with what was a radical idea, right? I mean, I lived that journey that you're talking about, in that I remember Martin Babinick, when I was starting what was Check, at the time was Check.com, became Outmatch. Martin taking me and to meet you and Nasser, and Seed Capital Fund invested in me. And then we went out and met Dan and Pete out at Rand Capital in Buffalo, and Zach at Cayuga Ventures. And you guys were the core of that business to get that business off the ground. Mm-hmm. Is that, and we were in Saratoga Springs, New York, right? The small town in upstate New York. Is that changing now when you look at what the pandemic did to remote work and the competition for talent and things like that? Do you see that change at all, shifting in that kind of white space investing, or is it still white space? So
there's massive change afoot, but it doesn't seem to have affected spreading venture capital more evenly around the country. So our thesis is still just as radical as it was before. But the real incredible changes in the workplace are making it even more attractive.
Yeah.
There's some things that it used to be, like we're meeting on Zoom here and we're recording this for a podcast. This used to be considered less than a face-to-face meeting. And so VCs would always say, well, we've got to fly in, or you've got to fly in, and we've got to have a face-to-face meeting. Sales calls had to take place, strategy meetings, all kinds of things had to be face-to-face. And now this is just normal.
Yeah.
So that really makes it easier for me as a venture capitalist sitting in Syracuse, New York, to make an investment in some place that's kind of hard to get to.
Yep.
Yeah.
If the company's in Aspen, Colorado, I don't have to worry about taking 3 flights there, because most of our meetings are going to be this way, and everybody accepts that.
Yep.
The remote work also makes hiring that much easier. Now, it will change the economics of hiring. So now a talented engineer in anywhere in the country can probably get a Silicon Valley salary.
They can.
But they probably won't hop from company to company every 10 months. So there's things that are changing, things that are staying the same. From our point of view, and our prediction is this fund 2 that we're operating right now is going to be even more successful than fund 1. And the whole pandemic phenomenon is, we see, and I predict, is a huge accelerant for the kinds of software as a service businesses that we invest in.
So
I agree. Yeah.
So you've been a multi-time founder. You're working with a ton of founders just in your current role. You're advising companies. What are the common mistakes that you see? I mean, if you have to give a founder advice, what is that advice? What are the common sort of pitfalls you see them fall into?
Well, I gotta slip in 2 shameless plugs here, because
you've earned it. Like years of mentoring, you've earned it.
I've mentored literally hundreds of startup founders, and I kept getting the same questions and seeing the same mistakes over and over and over again. So I ended up writing it all down, and as a computer engineer, I wrote it in a very succinct. I wrote it and rewrote it and rewrote it. So I've written the code, for all of the basics. The multiply repeated rookie mistakes are all identified, written down, and the answers are there in a tiny little book called Startfast, which is Chuck Stormon, Startfast.
Amazon.
That'll save you. It's the first 25 years of learning. Okay, that'll save you a ton.
There was a little pause there in our internet connection, Chuck. So the name of the book is Startfast, and you can buy it on Amazon.
You can buy it on Amazon. It's cheap.
All right, got it.
And that'll save you hours and hours of us having to listen to each other to figure out what your problem is. Just you can read it in 2 hours and get 25 years of wisdom.
I got a signed copy, by the way.
And I'm happy to sign it. But once you get past the basics, there are, one thing I did in the beginning of the pandemic is I took a training in how to be a executive coach, which people call a life coach. But coaching is so different than mentoring, because in coaching, I can only ask you questions. I can't tell you the answer. You have to come up with your own answers. And what I find is that each person, the mistake they're going to make is going to be very particular to them. Mm-hmm. And it's almost impossible to give someone advice and say, please avoid this mistake, because people are they're going to just go all in and make that mistake. So,
I don't know anyone like that.
Here's one of the ones.
What you know about me. Don't tell anyone. I'm just kidding.
Well, here's one of the ones that is kind of a meta, give you kind of an insight into what I see a lot. in this journey, as you're starting your first company, maybe you've been an employee and you've become a subject matter expert, and now you're starting your own business. There's a tendency to think that you've got to be it all and you've got to do it all and you've got to know everything and you can't make any mistakes. And let's face it, we have to have some ego to do this at all. But this is where the ego ends up tripping you up. There's this lesson, and Greg, you can attest to this, and Peter, you can attest to this, that you learn repeatedly throughout your career, which is there's a range in which you're good.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And then you
That's
need
so
other
true.
people to balance you, to enhance you, and to back you up. And you also need to know when to step back and let somebody else run. So
Mhm.
early in my career, I was really good from 0 to 5 million in revenue.
Mhm.
But I didn't know what I didn't know to run a bigger company. Over
Yeah.
my career, over the last 35 years, I've run larger and larger organizations. And now I know how to run a much larger organization, but I also know I don't like it as much.
Yeah.
So now I've learned how to scale, but I also know when I really don't have as much fun as I would like. So I'd probably be good to maybe start something else and hand this off to someone who really loves the part, when between when you raise your A round and you go public.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's this knowing yourself, what you're good at, what you enjoy, forming a team that is going to support you and complement you and back you up. And then you also need somebody who will tell you the truth when you're out over the front of your skis and you're about to do a face plant.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you've always been so passionate about everything you do. And that goes back to it. Like you said, when your passion's kind of like, I love doing this to 5 million and that's so fun and not as fun. So I'm self-aware that it's better if I wasn't doing it now. That's super important.
It's a
Above that
powerful
scale,
lesson.
I should be on the board. I shouldn't be running it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a powerful lesson, Chuck. I mean, and it's one, it's one that I've learned a few times, I think, in the course of my career, and most recently, how to make that decision to kind of step aside where, same as you, 0 to 5 million is, it's that stage, probably 0 to 10. I'm really happy and we're doing things and that creativity really flows. Here I was running a $50 million business and it was a job. Right.
The problems are different. And
yep.
I've had that experience now. I'm competent up to 100 million.
Right.
I'm glad to be competent, but boy, I don't enjoy the day to day, because a lot of it is really important people problems.
Mm-hmm.
They're really important,
Yeah.
but it's just not as much fun for me.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then there's people that's what they love. Right. And that's where they should be,
Right.
Totally makes sense.
So, not every company, Chuck, I mean, you're now on the venture side. So, right. So you've made the shift from founder, operator to full-time investor. Not every company should be out looking for venture capital, needs venture capital, or needs external investment. What are the characteristics you look for? What do you tell somebody who maybe, they're not a venture capital type investment, but they're still a great company, right? That has all the passion. You kind of alluded to this before. What is it you look for? What do you tell that, what do you tell that company to go do?
Sure. And I'm going to answer your question, but I just want to correct one thing. I am still an operator. I guess I'm kind of addicted to the
He is.
Oh, that's right.
I was going to say
to the practice of entrepreneurship.
He does more than one thing all the time.
Assuming any of my team members at Acumen Detection are watching this, I am the CEO of Acumen Detection, and
that's right. I apologize for that.
Absolutely passionate about it and absolutely committed to it. Now, I'll answer your question.
Which is such a cool. That's such a cool company. Like that was built just to solve problems for dairy farmers. Something that is so different than your first company. And
Yeah, I have done, I've done 7 of these, and this is the first biotech and the first
Yeah.
ag tech. And I've been doing it 3.5 years, and it's just an amazing, wonderful journey. And I have exited. It's owned by the Dairy Farmers of America. So I'm in that stage where
awesome.
post exit, I'm working for a $20 billion dairy cooperative. So it's a very mature, as startups go, it's a very mature startup is post exit at this point.
Yep.
Yeah.
But to answer your question about who should seek venture funding, it's always important first to distinguish, just a straight dividing line down dividing the world into 2 parts. There's companies, they're great companies on both sides, but dividing them down in 2 parts, there's scalable businesses and non-scalable business. So non-scalable business would be any small business, anything that the Small Business Administration is involved in, or anything that is so-called mom and pop, even if it's a conglomerate like a franchise, it's still not venture fundable because it's not scalable. So what's a scalable business? Scalable business is one that can, through the application of funding, grow rapidly. And by rapidly, I mean more than 100% year-over-year growth on a sustainable basis. And some of the deals I look at are 300% year-over-year growth. They will actually give me growth rates in the month-over-month.
Right.
And so 10 or 20% month-over-month translates into more than 100 to 300% year-over-year. I mean, it's a very, very large growth rate. So that's a really clean dividing line. No non-scalable business should seek venture capital. Now, within scalable businesses, then I think you can talk about the levels. So there are so-called rounds, which means when you're looking to raise money, if you are pre-revenue, meaning you have an idea, maybe you have a product, but you don't have any paying customers yet, then some will go seek venture funding at that stage, and it's typically the Silicon Valley kind of scenario to write your business plan on the back of a napkin and get a party round together of a bunch of investors and raise a couple of $1 million. But those are stories, just like kids on the basketball court in middle school. They're all dreaming about being in the NBA. And they all have their favorite NBA star that's saying, I'm Kobe Bryant, I'm, whatever they're going to say. The reality of it is that 0% of those middle school kids are going to be NBA stars. Not likely. So it's just like that with companies that are just an idea on the back of a napkin.
Yep.
Yeah, some do raise multiple millions of dollars in a party round. Best if you have already proven yourself, if the founder is a serial entrepreneur who's already had the same investors get a huge return, then they're basically betting with house money. And, if this is your first startup, better you prove that you're solving a problem for a population by actually having some revenue before you raise any money. So the first round is called the FFF round, the Friends, Family, and Fools round. That's where you take out the second mortgage on your house.
Yep.
That's called self-funding. That's where you go to your aunts and uncles and cousins and brothers and sisters and ask them for this investment. And the Fools part is really unkind because there are investors who will invest at that stage that are called angels because it's really more like venture philanthropy than it is like an investment. And you can also get grants from the government at that stage.
Yep.
Lots of ways to fund a company. Where somebody like me gets involved, we're early stage professional venture capitalists, so we get involved at the seed round. So for a seed investment, I want to see monthly recurring revenues that are real, documented, sustainable, and growing. So I want to see you at 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, $80,000 a month of monthly recurring revenue. And I want to see a growth rate. Are you growing 10% month over month? Are you growing 50% quarter over quarter? If you can show me that, and then you have passion, the right team, the right product, you're going after a big market opportunity, and you're solving a problem that's going to improve the world, and you're located outside of Silicon Valley or Manhattan, call me immediately. I have money to wire to you after the process of due diligence.
Asterix.
That's right. So, are there mistakes that you see that where companies will come to you and you're looking for capital that are otherwise very fundable companies for you, right?
Do you think it's a mistake to come to you too early? I don't think so, but like they come pretty early, they're kind of pitching you, but then maybe you could see what they do. Like they come back to you. Don't be afraid to go back, right?
There's no such thing as too early if you're just building a relationship.
Exactly.
And I can't remember who said this. There's somebody famous that I owe credit to this for. But if you want advice, ask for money. If you want money, ask for advice. So when you come to somebody like me, show me what you got and ask me for some advice. And that's the beginning of a relationship that may end up and has many times resulted in us making an investment and being in that, once we make an investment in a company, it's about a 10-year journey until our shares are acquired by somebody. We are in that business with the entrepreneur for the better part of a decade. So it's a serious thing.
So you made a point. I think we got to call out though. There's this thing that we say good money and maybe the other kind, right? So what you just described is good money, like someone that is in it with you. You've operated, you've done this, you went through this process. Like that's a big difference, like taking money, right? So friends and family is a good example. Like your buddy exited from something. This is like my story here. It was good money. Actually, that's not a good, like your aunt or uncle says, hey, here's $100,000. Good luck. They can't help you. Like, what are they going to do? They can't really help you. But like,
well, we're gonna be extremely careful about who we invest in.
Yeah.
And I would tell anybody that the entrepreneur and the team should be very careful about who they take investment from, just as careful as we are, because it is like you said, Peter, it's a two-way road. It's incredibly important that that the fit be good. Think about any 10-year relationship. I mean, most marriages don't last 10 years, right? So you've got to take this relationship seriously and understand that these are going to be people in your lives working with you on something you're passionate about. If you're not feeling it, you should pick somebody else.
And there's going to be a lot of dark days, right? I mean, I think that's the thing. When you really see who your investors are, it's on those dark days where you need, and I've seen both, right? I've experienced both. I've experienced, you and Nasser and Martin and where those dark days hit, and the first people I called were, those people, right? Were you guys to say, hey, I don't know how I'm gonna get myself out of this. Can you guys help me? And immediately you became the backstop, right? That's what you want. I've also had the others. I've also had the ones where, immediately there's a lot of blame and, shifting and
then the day gets darker.
And the day gets right. And it gets more scary.
It's
right?
not like someone saying, hey, been through it, can help you. Like, here's some things, here's an idea. Like, it's okay. You're good, man.
I think,
pick you up off the ground.
That advice though, of, what Peter mentioned, what you mentioned, Chuck, of, if you're thinking about going down that path of venture capital, talk to somebody in the space, right? Talk to there are most VCs, at least that I know, and I'm in the business now, and most that I know are willing to have a quick chat to say, tell me about what you're doing, and give you an impression. One of the best pieces of advice that I think ever got back in the really early days of my last company was, and this came from Martin Babinec, was always be raising a round ahead of where you need. And the reason was exactly what you said, Chuck, to start to build that relationship, right? To start to tell the story of, hey, I know you're not going to invest in me now. I know we're not the right profile for you, but let me tell you about my business and let me tell you what we're going to go do over the next 2-3 years. And if it's okay, I'm going to keep you updated on our progress. Right. And I think and that advice served me through round after round after round after round, and subsequently an exit to private equity. And I think, if I were to kind of give that, give that advice to a founder, that would be it, right? Is build those relationships and tell the story.
Probably puts a nice little star next to your name in the proverbial book, right? Because it's like, oh, there's someone that's paying attention,
Yeah, you can say, I know this person. That makes a huge difference. Yeah, I would agree with that. And I would also say that, one of the things the three of us have in common, and Martin and Nasser as well, is that we've done it.
Mm-hmm.
We've been in the shoes. We've had those dark days. So when somebody calls us up and says, oh my God, you'd never realize what just happened, I don't know what to do. I've had that experience 100 times. So I'm going to have compassion, and I'm going to have some practical input. I'm not going to react the way that the so-called not so great investor reacts, because we've had a common experience.
Yep.
And I should also put in a plug for Michael Quigley, who's joined us in Fund 2 as a general partner. If you'll indulge me, just a real quick story.
Please, yeah.
Startfast Fund 1 invested in Michael and his founder in 2013, 2014. And they were just getting started. They went through 3 dramatic pivots before they found the market that really started to get traction. And the company just grew like a rocket ship. Had a recapitalization in 2018 when a private equity firm came in. All of our Startfast Fund 1 investors got a nice check at that 2018 checkpoint. Mm-hmm. And then we still have an ongoing holding. So there's unrealized gains, but the companies continue to grow. They're now called Impel. They are just crushing it in the space of automotive merchandising. And Michael approached Nasser and I in 2020 and said that he wanted to pivot his career to venture capital. And what advice did we have? And we were just forming Fund 2. So we said, advice, come join us.
Yeah, we're going to try to get him on.
So once again, the operator that has built a SaaS company from nothing to huge. Yeah, it's the pattern match. So we're all firm believers in the best investor is going to have been an operator and had some failure and some success, but they've had the journey.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, totally.
Well, that's a great place to probably wrap this up, Chuck. And so before we do, how does somebody reach you? How does somebody learn more about Startfast Ventures? I know you're raising Fund 2 right now. So why don't you kind of talk about how somebody gets in touch with you, and if they're interested in either from an LP standpoint or from a founder standpoint?
Sure. Startfastventures.com is a starting point for anybody that's interested. I'm Chuck at startfastventures.com. So feel free to email me whether you'd like advice or whether you'd like to invest in a venture fund that with experienced investors, or whether you're looking for a venture fund to fund your operation. And we'll take it from there. And guys, this was a lot of fun. I hope we'll see more of each other.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. I'll tell you the same thing I said before. I don't know if it was before we started, that every time I talk to Chuck, I always get excited, like I could do more. I told him that, and I feel like that right now. Again, he's like, I'm like, I don't spend enough time with this guy, so I'm definitely coming to the Brewster in the summer. It's COVID, be damned, right? We got to do it.
Well, and on my side, I actually, just a real quick story. So when I exited out of my last company, I also, like you're talking about Mike Quigley, decided, hey, I'm going to pivot my career to venture, and Chuck and Nasser were the first guys that I reached out to, and to start to get advice about starting our own firm. And now I think, what are we doing, Chuck? Like, I think we've got two two transactions we're going to close in the next 30
You know, we're
days
just
together.
about to invest together
That's
in,
right.
in two deals. So it's,
That's right.
It's really great.
Yep. No, it's super fun. And you guys, the level of support that these guys put out, whether, for everybody in their orbit is just unbelievable. So I couldn't advocate for them more, and appreciate you coming on the show more, Chuck. And thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time on the Founders Journey podcast.
Thanks, guys.